Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrill, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
Welcome to the Workology Podcast, sponsored by Clear Company. In our current talent marketplace, we face lengthy recruiting cycles, a challenging candidate-driven market, and the hunt for top talent that can take up a lot of our time and also destroy our metrics, including time to fill. We're all looking for a better way. We want the best of the best when it comes to talent, though. But what if we weren't looking for the best? In a recent Disrupt HR talk, Suzanne Lucas, also known as the evil HR lady and a legend in the HR blogging world, talked about that employers should recruit satisfactory and average employees for their okay companies. You can see her full talk in this episode of the Workology Podcast. We're embedding in the video, but today we're going to talk directly to Suzanne and talk about why recruiting okay employees for your okay company just makes sense. Suzanne, welcome to the Workology Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
For those like 5 people, maybe in the universe of HR that don't know about your blog, can you just kind of talk a little bit about your background and your blog and how that all came about?
Well, it all came about because I wanted to be Dear Abby or Ann Landers or Miss Manners. I grew up reading those in the paper every day. And so when this blogging thing started, I was like, hey, I don't need, anybody to hire me. I can write my own advice column. And so I started doing that, and I did it anonymously at first because I was working for a big pharmaceutical company and they're quite conservative in general, and I didn't want to ruffle any feathers at work. And then life changed and things grew, and now that's what I do.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about the obvious. And I'm thinking about your Disrupt HR talk right now. Why don't we want ninjas in our workplace?
Well, first of all, because they're experts in espionage and deceit, and that's not really what we want. But when we're using the term ninjas, usually people mean that as they want an expert that can just come in and execute things flawlessly, and it sounds awesome, but it's not reality. And we can also end up with a huge mismatch. If you're not a manager that can execute flawlessly and you hire someone that can, they're going to be annoyed as heck at you, and they're going to want to move on quickly. And since most likely you're not perfect, looking for that perfect employee means you're on the mismatch and someone that's unhappy.
I know hiring rock stars and ninjas is kind of been the trend over the last several years. I love what you said in the Disrupt HR talk. Why do you think this is holding us, meaning recruiters and HR people, back?
Because what you're looking for is perfection. And perfection doesn't generally exist, and it takes forever to find this perfect person. And so you can either hire someone today that can do the job and do a good enough job, may need some training and support, but can do it, or you can wait 6 months or a year. You can interview 25 people, you can pull your hair out, and you can whine about a talent shortage. And that's what we really get when we hear this whining about a talent shortage. Is there's plenty of people out there, even with the incredibly low unemployment rate. There are people out there to do the jobs. It's just that we're looking for perfection, and we're not willing to create these people ourselves. And I have a friend who's a nurse, and when she graduated with her nursing degree, there's a huge nursing shortage. She had a terrible time finding a job. And one hospital even said to her, go out, get a job someplace else, and come back to us and we'll hire you in a year. So what they were saying is, we're not going to invest in you. We don't want to train you. We want someone else to do the investing, and then we'll poach you. And that's really what you're looking for when you're looking for these rock stars and ninjas. Somebody that somebody else has trained and developed, saying, I'm not willing to train and develop. I want someone else to do that.
I do think it's interesting that you're talking about people whining, because there is a lot of whining. There aren't enough people out there. I can't find anybody to do this job. But then when you look at these kind of hidden talent pools, like people with disabilities, also people with criminal convictions. I just did a podcast interview with Shelley Winner, and she has a great story about how she's formerly incarcerated, and she comes back, and she had to fight for that job. She went through the offer stage, and they tried to say, sorry, we don't want you because you have this criminal history. So good people are out there. You just have to, what you're saying is, invest and take a little bit of a risk.
Absolutely. When you think about that, it's not just the people with criminal convictions, but you also have people that have been unemployed for a long time. And somehow we say, well, if you got laid off, it must have been your fault, so now I'm not going to consider you. Or there are a lot of, especially women, there are some men, but there are a lot of women that are opting out of the workforce. These are generally highly educated, skilled professional women who choose to be stay-at-home moms because they have a husband with a good professional job as well, and who would love to work part-time. That's actually the strongest preference among women with children, is part-time work. But companies don't want to hire part-time people, and they're missing out. There are these people out there that would do the job, and instead they're saying, well, we want perfection. We want someone that wants to put in 80 hours a week and dedicate their entire life to building widgets. Well, maybe you could find someone better that can start today, and hire two part-time people if you need to. But companies are so hesitant to do anybody that they don't think is going to be perfect that it's really holding them up.
You're so right, because as you're talking, I'm thinking about my team, and we're kind of a group of ragtag folks that I've kind of picked from obscurity. They have good character, or I think they have a lot of good potential, and we have a lot of our team members who are only working 15 or 25 hours a week, or then they will send me a text and say, hey, can I work 40 this week? Because life doesn't work. It doesn't always fit within that time construct of what we have thought about in the past.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, the 40 hours a week is a number that was plucked out of thin air in the 1930s. It's like, why are we saying this? Why did we choose this? And then we're completely wedded to this idea that if you want to work fewer hours, there's something wrong with you. And the other thing is I don't see anybody saying, I want to work part-time and be paid a full-time salary. I mean, I would like to work part-time and be paid a full-time salary, but I don't think anybody is realistically expecting that. It's just, there's so much talent, and I don't generally like to use the word talent. There are so many skills out there that are available with people that don't come in the traditional package. Like you said, people that have been convicted of crimes, people that have been unemployed, people that want to be part-time, people that are returning to the workforce after taking time out to care for children or elderly parents. All of these people are there, and we're not chasing them, and we're avoiding them. We're actively avoiding them. Not to mention that we only want to hire people who are like us, and we say we want diversity, but when we say that, we mean different skin colors, but we still want them all to have gone to the same university that I went to. Got to hire from my alma mater, and so many places do that. They only recruit at a couple of schools. You're not getting diversity that way anyway, because no matter what people's skin colors look like, they were all trained by the same professors.
True. It's like if you are a tech startup in Silicon Valley and you only hire people from Silicon Valley with that same background or that same experience, you're really only getting it's not diverse at all. It's a group of people that think the same. They go to the same stores the same way. They ride their bicycles. They maybe are all vegetarian. I mean, I'm making broad assumptions here about people from Silicon Valley, but when you go outside that, so when I talk to tech companies, I'm talking about HR tech companies, and they're like, how do I grow my business, or how do I get more customers? And they're just kind of all living in San Jose and in this area. I'm like, your product and how you're marketing or selling or talking is not built for Susan, the HR manager of a manufacturing plant in Omaha. And I think it's a similar problem.
Yeah, it is. And I was talking the other day, I'm part of a mastermind group, which is a group of us that are either solopreneurs or small business owners. And we meet twice a month to go over our goals or whatever. And one of my colleagues in this group is an accountant, and he's Canadian, but he lives here in Switzerland. And he sometimes will translate for the Canadian clients from American English to Canadian English, because he says in Canada, they just approach things from a different angle than they do in the United States. So he'll use different wording when he's targeting Canadians. And I was like, I've never thought about targeting Canadians, or that they might prefer different writing styles. But then I think about it, the way the British write as compared to the way I write is very different. And, we're speaking the same language globally. And this is one of the things that I've learned living in Switzerland for the past 10 years. And where I live is an exceedingly global city. 50% of the population is Swiss, and 50% of the population is from all around the world. That so many cultures approach things so differently. And everybody assumes that their way of doing it is the only way to do it, until you run into somebody else that does it the complete opposite. And you're like, what? Wait, that's wrong. That can't be done that way. And they're like, wait, the way you're doing it is wrong. It can't be done that way. And then you start talking and realize that, oh, it's both just culture, and maybe we can both make changes.
One of the perspectives I think that you bring that I really love in your writing and your speaking and everything that you do is that you've been that corporate HR person, but now it's been, I don't know, how long has it been since you've been in a corporate HR role?
10 years, man.
Wow. So you have that perspective of now having some space and grown as an entrepreneur. What are some things that now, like looking back at that you think that HR recruiting teams are just doing that don't make sense? Because I'm starting to see a lot of those, even more so now for myself.
Well, one of the things is what we've talked about before, is the looking for perfection instead of looking for who can do the job. And that's not just a thing that recruiting teams are doing wrong. They're getting their marching orders from the hiring managers, because of course the hiring managers want perfection. So that's one of those things. The other thing, which has come back to bite everyone in the behind right now, is the crappy way recruiters have treated candidates for years and years and years. The ghosting of candidates, the 473 interviews that they drag you through and then ghost you. And they basically treated candidates like they were commodities on a shelf. And especially your big name companies get all of these applicants. So there's no reason to treat them nicely, because there's always going to be another pile of people. But now that the economy has improved and that the unemployment levels are so low, suddenly the top candidates have 12 different offers, and they're ghosting companies. And we brought that on ourselves. That's something that HR did. And, as a profession, somehow all the recruiters got together and said, we don't care about the candidates. We're not even going to bother to send an email that said, thanks, but no thanks. And now we're like, ooh, crap, candidates are disappearing on me. Well, you trained them. That's what you said it was the best way to do it, was ignore people. And, those kind of practices companies do. And I warned people about it years and years ago, because I was hearing from the the candidates, because people will tell me stuff that they would never say to their HR manager or say to the recruiter because they don't want to burn any bridges, but they'll tell me.
How many articles do you think you've written over the years? I know how many. I have a ballpark of how many I've written, but you have, written a lot.
That's a good question. I can actually give a fairly accurate answer. On my Evil HR Lady blog, I have 3,018 posts. And then I also ghostwrite places. So there's probably 100 more ghostwritten articles out there. So a little bit more than 3,000. Gosh, that's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot of words you think about.
That's a lot of words.
And so you touched on something that I want to talk a little bit more about, is because you are a writer and a blogger, you get a lot of insights and information that people wouldn't otherwise say publicly, particularly on the job seeker side of things. Can you share maybe kind of some of the more unusual messages or conversations that you've had with employees or candidates over the years?
Well, a year or so ago, I gave a TEDx talk where I talked about talent versus skills and how important it was to focus on skill rather than talent. And after I gave this talk, so many people came up to me and they were like, I'm in HR. I have been thinking this, but I can't say it. I can't bring it up. And then people who weren't in HR were like, oh my gosh, this is it. It's the hard work and the dedication that matter, but I'm getting rejected because I don't have the right degree. And no one's willing to talk about that because there's this whole groupthink fear and this spiral of silence where we don't want to disagree with the boss because then we might get on her bad side and people don't talk about it. And like I said, with the things about ghosting and all of that, I saw that coming for a long, long, long ways off because people would write me and they'd say, I had 6 rounds of interviews and then I never heard from these people again. And I would write about this and everybody's like, oh, it's isolated. And it wasn't isolated. It's everywhere. And, talking about that. And another thing that people tell me a lot of stories about unfair HR managers and just the completely unprofessional HR managers who are best friends with the managers or sleeping with the managers and just completely ignoring good policy. And they're doing so and getting away with it because most people don't know what their rights are. And I cannot tell you the number of people who have written me saying, this is a problem. What can I do? This is a violation of this law. You can file a complaint with the EEOC. And they're like, oh, really? I just thought it was annoying. And I'm like, no, it's illegal. Either these HR people are not at all trained or they just flat out don't care and assume that they can get away with it. And for the most part, they do get away with it.
You talk about all the stories of people that come up and speak to you. I get a lot of those too, in email or at a conference or wherever. And one of my favorite blogs to read is Alison Greene's Ask a Manager, because some of the stuff that's in there is just too, it's too crazy, which means it has to be true.
Yeah, and she gets the craziest things. She wrote about the difference between conference HR and real HR. And, conference HR is like, what can we do to empower our teams? And real HR is somebody's smearing poop on the bathroom wall. How do we run an investigation?
That's so, and that has actually happened to me quite a few times, unfortunately, in my HR career. Let's take a reset. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you are listening to the Workology podcast sponsored by Clear Company. Today, we're talking about how average is okay when it comes to hiring employees. We're talking with Susan Lucas.
This podcast is sponsored by Clear Company, the fastest growing talent management system on the market, and recently won G2 Crowd's #1 user recommended Winter 2018 award. Visit clearcompany.com to learn more.
Who do you like to read? Like, who's your favorite blog? Or it doesn't have to be in HR, but just where do you like to spend your time on the internet?
Facebook, but I do spend a lot of time on Facebook, and I am in some HR groups on Facebook, and I can advertise my own Facebook group on Facebook. It's called Evil HR Lady, and everyone's welcome to join. We talk about all sorts of fun HR stuff there and share a lot of HR funnies. But I definitely read Alison Greene's Ask a Manager, and I actually think everybody on the planet should be reading her blog, because not only is it incredibly entertaining, Alison is a management genius. She really is. And if you want to see how great of a manager she is, read her comments section, because it's the only place on the entire internet where the comments are always good. Like, she manages that comment section completely light-handedly. She's not, micromanaging it, but she's, whipped everybody into shape. So that is one. Obviously, since I just quoted Robin Schooling, I read her and Charlene Laube, HR bartender, and I read a lot of employment lawyers, John Hyman, Dan Schwartz, Eric Meyer. Now I'm losing anyway, all of those people plus more, but now I can't think of any more at the moment. But I like to keep up on those kinds of things, know what other people are thinking.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Where should people go? We're going to include the link to the Facebook group in the transcript, but where else can they go to connect with you and learn more about what you do?
Well, you can always come to my blog, which is evilhrlady.org, or you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Real Evil HR Lady, or LinkedIn is Suzanne M. Lucas. You can find me there. And if you Google Evil HR Lady, I will pop up. So I'm easy to find that way.
Well, thank you so much. I have followed your blog for a long time, and this was actually it was the first time that we met to do this podcast. So know that you have a fan. I am an avid reader. I remember when you were anonymous and when you came out as Suzanne. So I keep doing what you're doing. I know you're helping a lot of HR and employees.
Thank you. And it's surprising to me this is the first time we've interacted, because I already felt like I knew you because I've read so much of your stuff and your tweets and all that. And I'm like, oh, wait, I've never actually talked to her.
That's what happens in the internet space.
It does, doesn't it? It's funny that way. You're like, oh, I know you. Wait, I don't.
All right. Well, that's it.
Great.
All right. Well, I love Robin Schooling as well. She's on a webinar that I did last week. So she's one of my favorite people. So I love that you.
She has stories, man. All those years working in the HR casino world, dude.
I know she needs to write a book.
Or
have an anonymous podcast or something where people can submit their stories and she can just share them. That would be.
That's hardcore HR, man. And I loved her delineation between the conference HR and real life HR, because it is. I have never been to an HR conference where they've talked about how to investigate bathroom problems, but every HR manager has dealt with one. Everybody has. I mean, we had a bathroom problem in an HR department where the only people with access to the bathrooms were other HR people. So it's like, it was one of us. And I wasn't in charge of the investigation. I don't know.
That's good. I'd delegate that one if I could.
Everybody would.
First, let me say that it was an honor to talk to Suzanne. I have followed her blog for many years, and she has had a huge influence and impact in my own blogging career. She might not know it, and really this is the second time that we've talked. The first was the prep call for the podcast, but I just want to say thank you, Suzanne. I love what you're doing, and I really mean that you have impacted so many people, including myself, that you have never even met. In our recruitment marketing, we're also focused on how to find top talent, hidden rock stars, and super innovators. But as Suzanne said, we're not all rock star companies. We're trying to get there, though. Understanding that we need to recruit average, competent employees for most of our positions could be the key to managing those pesky KPIs and saving on our bottom line. Sure, we can hold out for the heroes for those C-level and consultant roles, but if we try to fill our pool with nothing but those alpha personalities and gurus, it's going to be a long time before we fill those roles, and we are going to be paying so much more money, but do we really get that bang for the buck? Suzanne, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you for joining the Workology podcast. This is a podcast sponsored by Clear Company. This podcast is for the disruptive workplace leader who's tired of the status quo. That's why I'm here. That's why I do this. That's why we talk to interesting people with interesting and new perspectives. This is Jessica Miller Merrill. Until next time, you can visit workology.com to listen to all our previous podcast episodes.